Foster youth will receive a comprehensive academic assessment. This is the elementary level intervention. There is a secondary approach also, which involves the development of individualized culmination plans for our middle school students and individual graduation plans for our high school students. So that is where, that's where this foster youth support plan, $8.82 million in FY 14-15. So this is the proposed investment for the 14-15 school year. This 75 is the estimated number of new full-time equivalent employees that will be providing this support. In 15-16, the investment goes to $9.82 million. There's an additional 10 FTEs, or full-time equivalent. That's what FTE stands for. And in 16-17, it goes to 10.82 and an additional 10 full-time employees. These FTE counts are based on average salary of the individuals that would support this kind of program. So when we actually make the hires, the actual cost will be a little bit different based on their experience. The second line here is family source system proposal, and this involves establishing physical locations distributed across the district. I think that there is going to be some placement based on where we understand our concentrations of foster youth. That involves $1.06 million and 19 staff in 14-15, and then we will maintain that investment forward. English language learners. So we have 154,110 English learners. The expected outcomes from these investments is that graduation rates will increase by 3% annually for this population. That we will increase the number of long-term English language learners that reclassify by at least 2% a year. The investments that help us make progress towards these outcomes: English learner coaches, $4.26 million is what we spent in the current year. We're going to maintain that investment going forward. The English language master plan implementation, there's $6 million in 13-14 and forward. There is Apollo, is a dual language immersion program or a dual language program. We're maintaining that investment going forward. And multilingual, multi-education department, providing support for English learners. We're maintaining that investment going forward. Number 3 is school climate and student engagement. And this is focused on secondary schools to create a stronger environment for learning. This is focused on a 1% increase in scoring, 1% increase scoring proficient and above over the Smarter Balance System SSF benchmark. That's a really wordy way of saying that our assessment tests changed, and we don't have a test to measure against because it's being introduced this year. So we're establishing a benchmark in 14-15, and then we measure our progress against how they score in 14-15. Decreased suspensions by 5%, and a 6% increase in attendance by 16-17. Over here you see the instructional days lost due to suspensions. There is a downward trajectory. We want to make that number as small as we can. So the first investment line there, PSAs, PSWs, no risk. Let me translate that for you. Those are pupil services and attendance counselors. These are psychiatric social workers, and no risk means that because LAUSD is a declining enrollment school district, we would normally reduce workforce to match our enrollment. So we are preserving these positions despite the fact that we're declining enrollment. So that's 120 positions that we did not eliminate. Health and student supports. $2.5 million, new investment in 14-15 and forward. That's 15 full-time equivalent employees. Instructional technology support, $8 million in 14-15. That's 75 staff. That goes to $16.4 million and another 79. And then we maintain that investment out. School technology support, $1.8 million in 14-15. That's 23 FTEs. It goes to 12 in 15-16 and 128 FTEs, and then we maintain that forward. These investments are around ensuring that all of our students have access to appropriate technology in the delivery of our instruction. So again, the investments for school climate and student engagement continue. The outcomes remain the same. Title I hold harmless. There was actually, I want to point to this line really quickly because there actually was a question in the cards that I saw about schools that fall below Title I eligibility threshold. That's what this line is for. This is a 1-year hold harmless for the schools that fall under the eligibility threshold so that they have some buffering time to make adjustments in their budget for that. Restorative justice counselors, these are the investments focused on reducing our suspensions and expulsions. School climate and restorative justice is another $2 million. It goes to 3 and then 5 in 16-17. We have AP instructional specialist secondary schools. It says C number 6 read. So we're going to see on up here, investment number 6, there will be more detail on these investments. But in 15-16, you see it's $3 million and 20 FTEs. $7 million in 16-17 and an additional 27. There's a decimal place missing there, 7, not 7.
Gee, you caught it.
3 pupil services and attendance psychiatric social workers, secondary counselors. Again, number 1 and number 6. It's $8 million in 15-16 and 80 FTEs. It's $9 million in 16-17, additional 10 FTEs. Continuing, there is custodial support. There's an augmentation, $1.5 million in 15-16, which adds about 25 FTEs. That goes up to 2.5 in the next year and an additional 17. 3.5 in 16-17 and another 17. So at the end of 3 years, it's a total of 59. We have maintenance and operations and routine maintenance. That's building and trades. It's $1.5 million in 14-15. The FTEs. $16.4 million in 15-16, 248 positions. $16.4 million, so we maintain the investment going forward. So custodial is, we have multiple job classes in the school district. Custodial is a specific job classification. Building and trades, this actually would include expenditures for things like carpenters and plumbers as well. So this is a specific line item for custodial workers. This is a line item that aggregates the addition of folks to help us in the maintenance of our facilities, which would be more of the building and trades related, plumbers and electricians and that work as it's necessary. There's a clerical enhancement for our high schools, $1.5 million, 27 FTEs in 14-15. That goes to 5 in 15-16 and 64 FTEs, and then again to 7 and another 36. What you'll see is that in these investments, they support our elementary and middle schools, but our high schools have suffered the largest cuts over the last 5 years, and so you will see that some of these investments are targeting specifically secondary schools. Again, the nurses, also at the high school, $1.5 million, 15 FTEs in 14-15. That goes to 6.5, an additional 50, and then 8.5 for another 20. Psychologists, $3.2 million is what we're spending in the current year. This is part of the $700 million that we identify as 13-14 supplemental and concentration funding. In 14-15, we maintain that forward and we maintain that investment out. Again, campus aid, 7.66 in 13-14, and we maintain that investment. That's 77 FTEs. Off-norm, one-time school resources. So there are numerous requests for additional resources. The way that the majority of schools receive resources at LAUSD is tied to enrollment counts. Schools get very close to the break point on getting an additional teacher or additional resource. This line right here is the requests from schools that have fallen just below that mark to get an additional resource on the campus, and $1.1 million or 11 positions is what has been funded. School police, this is $13.02 million. That's identified in 13-14, and that investment is carried forward. Number 4 is special education. I know that there was a question about this 449.88. Let me start up here with the overview. We have 71,000 students in our special education program. That's the largest special education program in the state of California and probably west of Mississippi. While LAUSD's special ed population, while LAUSD's enrollment has declined, the special education population has stayed relatively static. That is problematic for LAUSD because the funding mechanism for special education in California is a census-based funding model. It is not for the 71,000 kids that are identified as special ed. It is tied to our total enrollment. So while our enrollment goes down by 11 to 15,000 students per year, our special education population stays the same, and that means there's less money each year to pay for this program. So the 449 right here is a portion of the contribution that the general fund makes to support the special education program. And a big reason that that is required is that this program is supposed to be reimbursed at 40% of our total cost by the federal government. We have never received more than 18%. We're supposed to get 40%. So that everyone else in the school system makes up the difference by contributing this amount to the special education program. This amount that is identified in 1314 is the proportional share that we identified that serves unduplicated students in our special education program. So our special education program, along with some of the other programs that we're going to talk about this afternoon, serve these unduplicated student counts in our enrollment to a level that is at least as reflective of our general enrollment. Generally, some of these populations are overrepresented in these programs. So this is the amount based on the local control funding formula that we identified of the general fund and contribution to special ed that applies to these unduplicated students. So per the regulations, we recognize a portion of the 1314 contribution and identify that going forward. In the next line here is $17.55 million, the special education supplemental concentration increase. In your, I'm trying to remember exactly what it says in your local control accountability plan, but this is an augmentation to ensure that we're not over-identifying students for the program. So this is additional training, additional supports to ensure that children are being appropriately referred and identified for the special education program. And then an increase in hours for our special ed aides to make sure that they're available at the times that students need them. School budget autonomy. This is, we have a group of schools at LAUSD, there's about 71, that are pilot and network partners. These schools have autonomy over their budgets. And what that means is that they receive basically a lump sum, and they identify how to build the academic program at the school based on their academic plan and the students' needs. That's a per pupil funding model. Most other schools in the district receive their resources through a norm allocation, which is a toolkit of statements. And then the district makes sure that the budget is whole for those statements. So, $85 million of former EIA funding which has been collapsed into the local control funding formula, that is general fund money now, is being directed to schools. So they have received this based on identified students. There was a $26 million carryover from the prior year, which was retained at the schools. And then we're making this $27 million allocation, which is right here, through a per pupil allocation based on the local control funding formula. And that is $27 million. We have made an estimate of 180 here because, again, the decisions are being made on the campus. This is based on an average salary. The specific decisions that they make will impact the number of FTEs there. In 1516, what we also want to identify here is that we are doing analysis looking at the level of funding that schools are receiving, the level of resourcing that they're receiving, compared to the level of revenue that is being generated by the students on the campus. The reason that you see growth here is that this is directed to the schools where we identify that these schools should be receiving additional resources. So these are schools that have been identified as underfunded. So we're targeting these resources to these underfunded schools first. Target student population school supports, $18.36 million. Allocation of schools TSP, that's targeted student population, and that's EIA, $85 million going forward. Teacher supports. This is the slide that's tied to the Reed settlement. 37 schools identified in that lawsuit with high teacher turnovers, students with high needs. We want to make sure that we minimize as part of the settlement, minimize turnover at those school sites. So the expected outcomes, increased teacher retention at those 37 schools, and increased student achievement as a result. So APs and instructional specialists, $5.45 million in 14-15. Expect that's about 37 FTEs and maintain that investment forward. Special education support, $2.45 million, 24 FTEs and forward. Professional development for administrators. This is training for all of our represented school-based staff. It's $90,000. There's a principal basis change. We want to make sure that our principals are on-site and available when our students are there and our parents are there. So that is to address that. Admin recruitment and retention bonus is $70,000 in 14-15, $350 in 15-16, and $440 in 16-17. There are also people services and attendance counselors, psychiatric social workers, and secondary counselors included in this settlement. $4.1 million in 14-15, at about 37 FTEs. We maintain the investment forward. Professional development for teachers is a $6 million investment in 14-15, and then that investment goes down to about 1.09 forward. This is the way that this was negotiated.
Got another one, Glenn.
Mentor teacher stipend, $910.
154.
Subs, $3.24 million, it's about 24 FTEs.
Low level.
Retention of displaced teachers, $2.39 million, about 25, that will preserve about 25 positions. There's going to be surveys related to this, about $50,000, and this is BITSA, beginning teacher and support and assistance, about $2 million. Parent engagement. There was a question in the deck, what's the percentage identified for parent engagement? 1% of new LCFF funding. So the current year, it's $1.8 million. This is what's in our budget now. $5.12 million in FY 14-15. $7.81 million in 15-16, and $8.54 million in 16-17. So the expected outcomes here are increased training and increased participation in our school experience survey. This is going to be important as we continue to move forward with the LCAP and LCFF. We may be adding some questions for additional feedback there. Number 8 is elementary arts, libraries, and teacher support, and this is a shift to the Common Core 6 standards and the English language development standards. We need to build on our pre-K foundation, school readiness language development program, and we're one of the only districts in the state to have retained 24-to-1 kindergarten through 3rd grade class size through this entire fiscal crisis. The local control funding formula includes a funding augmentation for hitting this K-3 class size of 24-to-1, and it is that incentive is stepped in over a 7 or 8 year time frame. What that means is that at LAUSD we have this class size already, and we're not seeing full funding for that until the out years. So we're supporting that and have continued to support that. The expected outcome in these investments is a 2% increase over this assessment benchmark. As I mentioned before, our tests have changed, which means we don't have a measure to benchmark against yet. We're going to get that in the 14-15 school year. The investments here are additional assistant principal instructional specialists, $7 million, 47 positions, an additional 10.3 at 15-16 at 22 positions, 13.7, 23 positions for a total of 92 at the end of the 3 years. Implementation or augmentation to the arts plan, $2.5 million is what we're saying in 14-15, that's 8 additional positions. $8.3 million in 15-16, 60 additional positions. 15.7 in 16-17, and 78 additional arts positions. Library aides, this is a restoration of library aides. You see in 14-15, $6 million, it's 192 positions, and we carry that forward.
Cool.
Middle school English language, arts, and math. So again, supporting the shift to the Common Core, English language development standards. We need to make sure that we continue to focus on English language, arts, and math in the middle schools. And this is about class size reduction over this 3 years. So class size, middle school math and ELA by 2. What this means is that the investment would reduce class size by 2 students in English language, arts, and math. And there's a $6 million investment in 14-15, that's 60 FTEs, $12 million in 15-16, another 60, and 18 in 16-17, another 60, that's 180 additional teacher positions. I know that this is being stepped in on a grade-by-grade basis. So I believe what they're doing is starting at 8th grade, and then in each additional year, they would move to another grade span and reduce class size again. Target support for middle and span, again, that's the same class size reduction, 47 FTEs, $7 million going forward. Librarians at our middle schools, $1.5 million, 15 FTE in 14-15. The investment goes up to 4 and then another 25 employees, $5 million in 16-17, another 10 FTEs added. College and career readiness is priority number 10. So about 36% of our students are on track to meet ADG requirements currently. The majority fall off track in 9th grade by not passing the English language, arts, or math. These are the trends here. The expected outcome, graduation rates will increase by 3% for subgroups below the district average, maintain and increase foster youth graduation rate. So the class size, high school math, and ELA by 2. This investment would reduce class size by 2 students in our high school English and our high school math classes, starting with 9th grade. Each of these years of investment goes on to the subsequent grades. So we start in 9th, then 10th, then 11th. Accelerated academic literacy, $4.03 million is what we're spending in 13-14, and we're maintaining that program. And then the options program, in 13-14 we're spending $56 million. That investment goes up by $1 million in each year. The options program serves all of our students. We have multiple models for those students who have trouble making it through a traditional school setting. So there are multiple avenues to complete the requirements and receive a degree through the options program. We want to continue to invest in those kinds of options and make sure that as many of our kids are graduating as possible. These are the continued investments. Adult ed, this is only the supplemental and concentration part. $14.56 million is what we're investing in 13-14. We're going to maintain that investment in 14-15. There's 146 FTEs. So there's a move here to a state grant. The governor has said that all school districts who have an adult education program will maintain it through 14-15, and that we're supposed to be working with community colleges, and that there is this new funding mechanism being developed. That's what this move to state grant is. So we're anticipating that the governor implements that state grant program for adult ed, and we would move the expenditures to that funding source. We also operate regional occupation centers and programs, $10.27 million in the current year, and we maintain that investment going forward. Registration time for schools is $1 million in each year. That's to make sure that we have counselors on site and make sure that kids are getting signed up for the right classes, the classes they need in order to meet ADG requirements and graduate on time. So those are the investments based on the themes in the Local Control Accountability Plan. Everything that we've gone through here is on this document. This is the $137 million of augmented services and programs that is part of the supplemental concentration. What kinds of questions do you have about this? She's right here.
Mi pregunta es, todos estos nuevos posiciones no las había antes, o sea, estamos comprando más posiciones o tenemos una tasa de comparación con el presupuesto anterior. ¿Cómo podemos comparar la diferencia? Porque en todas las presentaciones que nos están dando, yo no puedo decir, oh, está mejor este plan, porque no me han mostrado el plan que estaba antes. No puedo ver cuál es la diferencia de uno y el otro. Igual en cuanto al dinero, no puedo ver eso porque no se me da la información de cuánto era el presupuesto del año anterior a este año, cuánto es la diferencia en cada programa, en qué programa tal vez se recortó dinero, en qué programa no, o sea, estoy ciega, yo no puedo decir que está perfecto o muy bien este plan. Quiero saber cuál es el presupuesto antepasado y cuál es la diferencia en cada categoría.
Okay, so the question was, what is the budget this year and the budget last year? I want to point you to this document. The first column on the document is an item number. The second column is a description of the program. The third column is a bargaining unit. The fourth column is the 13-14 amount. This is the level of investment in the prior year on these program expenditures. So if there is not a dollar amount there, we were not investing in that in 13-14, in this specific intervention. So the positions that I called out as additions, let's see. So for example, this class size reduction, those are new positions. So if there is not a position, it's rather not an investment in the 13-14 column, and there is an FTE amount in the 14-15 column, these are new investments and these are new positions. So we would be bringing on new staff or rehiring people who have been laid off in the past. Okay, so let me first point out that this model is new this year. So the funding mechanism that the district is receiving money through is completely different than it was in 12-13. Having said that, the 12-13 budget documents are available on the Budget Services website. So if you wanted to take a look at the 12-13 district budget, that's available online right now. And that's at achieve.lausd.net/budget. Number two.
Con esta nueva que nos acaban de presentar, alcanzo a ver que no están contemplados los niños gifted, en donde están. Últimamente que ha estado trabajando en algunos grupos de padres, como la revisión de título 1, no ha sido contemplado este grupo de niños, y yo creo que también requieren ellos de apoyos especiales. Me he dado cuenta que solamente las escuelas que son gifted y que tienen los programas que están catalogadas como escuelas gifted es donde los niños están recibiendo el apoyo que tienen que recibir, pero hay muchas escuelas que tienen el programa y no les están dando fondos para poder apoyar a este tipo de niños. Entonces, ¿por qué no se contemplan? Y también hace años se contemplaban el programa donde apoyaban a las niñas que salían embarazadas. También hace años había recursos para poder apoyar a esas niñas y siguieran estudiando, tampoco se volvieron a contemplar.
So the question was around allocation of funding for gifted and talented. The local control funding formula focuses on populations of need. The unduplicated counts of our English language learners, our foster youth, and our low-income students. The funding mechanism for gifted and talented was collapsed into the local control funding formula by the governor, and that was adopted by the legislature. So it is part of the decision-making process at the school level, with the school site council and the principal and the staff there, about how they may want to use funding available at the school site to support a gifted and talented program at the school site.
Thank you. Murphy.
My question has to do with the foster youth, and it says that you have 11,600 foster youth, which is you're budgeted for that number, and the support plan goes up every year, but then it says that in the support plan that there will be a 1-to-100 ratio of PSA counselors, psychologists, and support. And according to your budget, there will be no increase in the funding for those positions. And we know that this 11,000 number that you're using is a fictitious number because it's very low. I mean, it's underrepresented of the actual number of foster youth.
So the number that's represented up here actually is the high estimate at LAUSD. The number that is being used by the state for funding purposes is about 3,000. And it's because they exclude all the foster students who are in kin care or any of the family-related placement. It's only, and we're working on discussion with DCFS, CDE, and trying to reconcile their definition of foster, DCFS's definition of foster, and our definition of foster are all different. This is the high number. We want to make sure that we identify as many foster youth as we can in order to serve them in this plan.
So as that number increase, will the PSA and the support services budget increase to support those students?
That's why we have the opportunity to revisit the plan annually and adjust accordingly.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Number 4.
Very good.
Somebody who goes to the bathroom. I have two questions. One is really short. When we see a number like 95 total FTE, is that district-wide?
Yes.
Or is that-
Yes.
Okay, so that would be, so when you showed us custodial, there was a really small number. Is that all the custodians in the district?
No, that is only the additional positions.
Okay, well, that leads into the other question that I answered, which is, what about the rest of the budget?
So the local control accountability plan, we talk a little bit in the document about the base program, and that in section 3 of that document, part A, let me just grab a copy of the document so that I can talk to you about the specific pages. So section 3 identifies the supplemental and concentration services as well as services for all students. And that is what we're broadly calling BASE. So the BASE program is what we're identifying in A, and that is an aggregation of the I'll show you the number on there's a catch-all line right now on the back of this investment worksheet, both the Spanish and English version. It's in this base funding section, and it's towards the bottom. It says, all other base program, $2.86 billion. That's a lot of money, and it would make this document hundreds of pages long. But we are working on a summary document. That is obviously a huge chunk of the budget, but it is a chunk of the budget that is the basic operating conditions of the district. There's not a lot of movement there. For example, staff makes up about 80% of the total budget. 80.
77.
Okay. So
Do your math.
So that means that in a budget where we're not making reductions in force, 77 to 80% of our budget is fixed. So we're working on a summary of that base that is a little bit more concise, that will give you detail on what we're proposing in the base expenditure portion, and then show you side by side, here's what is the supplemental and concentration investment. But this is all work that's happening in our budget system right now, and that is happening right now as we speak. So as soon as we have the document available, we're going to make it available to everybody, and I completely understand. It would be very helpful to have that document right now. There are people literally coding things as we're talking.
One more. We have number 5.
Oh, boy.
So we've heard a couple different references now in this document as well as the speakers
yesterday and today about interaction between funding streams from, even though I understand they're different, categorical versus these which are targeted. And so my question is along the lines of what Deanna had started to ask. She's talking about it in time, and I'm asking about it in space. In other words, if we have a section of money that's being taken away from this section to provide for hold harmless for schools that dropped under Title I just for the first time, it's taking money from this section, but it doesn't, for example, give us a sense of the context of what happens to a school that's at 48% Title I for the second year in a row, but is at 51% for unduplicated populations. What does that mean if they're only funded at norm levels, and we can't see that they're not getting any of this additional? How do we close the achievement gap for that majority of students on campus who are students in need? How do we assess the validity of these presuppositions if we can't think also about where there are funding streams for Title I that do apply to some of these populations that we're thinking about, and Title III that also applies? What can you do to help us get the big picture? If you're asking us to give evaluations and seek commentary, can you give districts a sense of the need for not just looking at 2012-13 online, which we can't do right now, but also
I have it here.
the budget and the expenditures line by line, so that going forward we can look and see where is the money going, where is the money doubled up, where is the money not reaching, where are there students who need to
Make clear that I did take that request back. There isn't anything to see about our budget yet, other than the prior year data. So all of this, when we come out with a second interim, for example, that's not a change to the budget. The budget still remains the same. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that when we would release a report at first interim or second interim, that's an evaluation of where we are at a point of time, and making an estimation of our revenues and expenditures to the end of the year. It does not change the budget. So to the extent that you want to see additional information about what's happening in the school year, what you would want to see is expenditures. And expenditures are available for every single school site on the school website right now. So you can take a look at the school level budget and the school level expenditures anytime you want to. I agree that we would want to try and get that information out there. It's just not in a format that we can post to the web yet. So the budget, I think we're probably talking about closer to June to being able to get lines of items up on a website. The other thing that I want to point out is that you mentioned categorical sources, Title I and Title III. So we do have a supplement, not supplant requirement, which means that the investments in our base program and to this extent, the supplemental concentration funding have to be made before we start having conversations about how to use Title I. Otherwise, we get into trouble with these supplement versus supplant things, and our auditors have a problem with us. That's how we end up having to pay back big portions of Title I application. So there is a timing concern. I completely hear you, and I understand what you're saying. We have also created training on the Budget Services website, which attempts to put a framework around the entire budget development process, at least at the school level, creating a strategic budget development process that focuses on data multiple months through the year. But also, what we would want is an interaction with our school site council so that they understand here are the investments that are made through the general fund budget and through the supplemental concentration funding. And this, based on what we have made here in the general fund budget, is how we would want categorical sources like Title I to supplement the investments we've made. So the categorical discussion needs to come after this part is more baked.
Right. And that is all the questions for this segment.
5 questions. What a joke. Joke time.
Thank you, William. You'll have some time now at your tables to sit with your facilitators and to look at, or specifically through the academic services sections that you've been looking at, and look at the dollar amounts that align with them. And then to record any feedback or any questions or additional information that you'd like. We will have district representatives still walking around, being able to answer any questions that you may have, and William will be here to assist as well. So, thank you very much.
Okay.